Hi, everybody. Mitch Tam here. Thanks for joining me today for this week's security news update. In the alerts department, researchers at Palo Alto Networks, one of the big network hardware providers, say that they were able to use AI to generate 10,000 variants, malicious piece of JavaScript code, and that it would likely evade detection for 88% of the time. So that's not really good for the good guys, unfortunately. They're also testing the ability to steal data from large AI models, including one that compromises data on Google's AI chip, the Tensor. So, the good guys and the bad guys, as is always the case, are in this balance, this yin and yang. And, AI is both helping the good guys and helping the bad guys. Next, in the alerts department, the feds are considering banning TP-Link routers over cybersecurity risks. Now, some people say this is more a political move than it is a cybersecurity move. But TP-Link has basically a corner on the small office, home office router market, and about 300 ISPs, internet providers, use TP-Link hardware as their standard go-to default hardware. As the feds ban it, they won't have to remove the hardware that's in place, but they'll need to find the next cheapest Chinese piece of garbage router that they can. I don't know that will necessarily improve security, but it certainly will hurt TP-Link. So TP-Link, of course, says, not us, not our problem, not our fault. We're not doing anything bad. In the CMMC Q&A section, there's notes on the assessment process, how it works, and what happens if you fail, which is not necessarily good news, by the way. And if you're not on our list to get the version of the newsletter, then reach out to us, info@cybersecurity.com. That's CYBERCECURITY. That's security with a C.com. Or Mitch at cybersecurity.com. In the reference section, I shouldn't laugh at Cisco, but it's fun. Hackers stole about 4.5 terabytes of data from Cisco. If you assume most of this is text, and some of it's probably not, that represents about 2 million pages of documents. So it's a fairly sizable. A lot of it was source code, and they have slowly been leaking it. So they leaked about 4.5 gig or 5 gigabytes of data a week ago. Now they leaked another 5 gigabytes of data. This particular 5 gigabytes included software artifacts, maybe heart attacks for Cisco, network configuration files, testing logs, cloud server images, and other sensitive data. And these two drops only represent about 20% of the stuff that they claim to stole. And I think they're probably still trying to extort money from Cisco to stop them from continuing to leak the data. I don't know. But, the message is kind of, for you, A, what damage would crooks do if they stole your data? And B, are you comfortable that they can't steal your data? So if you need help with either of those, please reach out to us. And the important issues, God, sometimes not so great. In the important issues and patches department, Microsoft announced or revealed another NT-LAN manager 0-day. Remember that LAN manager has been, our NTLM protocol has been deprecated, meaning that they're no longer releasing fixes for it because it's old. But the problem is that if you remove it, you break stuff that uses it. So people are between a rock and a hard place. This most recent bug, hadn't been patched yet, is not going to be patched until April, they say. And Microsoft's history on that, the first time may not be the charm. They say you can mitigate the vulnerability by enabling extended protection for authentication, or EPA. It is enabled by default on Windows Server 2025 for the two people that are running that. But you can't turn it on. You'll have to figure out what you break. when you do that. But sounds like that's not going away, to the degree that you can turn off land NTLM. That would probably be the best move if you can do it, because this is not going to be the last bug for sure. In the legislative and legal departments, the SEC is fighting Jump Crypto, $123 million. They're doing this because they secretly loaned Terraform's Labs $20 million to prop up their floundering crypto tokens, which earned Jump about $1.25 billion. That was a pretty profitable deal for them, except it was undercovers, and that's not legit under the SEC rules. But a few months later, the token melted down into nothingness anyway. So not great. And 123 million to Jump Crypto. Next, also in the legal department, the FCC, based on the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, is going to get $3 billion more to help smaller telecom companies to replace Chinese gear in their network. Bigger companies have to pay for it themselves, which means you and I have to pay for it if we're using one of the bigger companies. Initially, Congress had allocated, I think, about 1.8 or 1.9 billion. That disappeared. That pot of money was used up very, very quickly. And basically, at this point, industry said, okay, you say you want us to replace it. You say you're going to pay us. When you do, we'll replace it. So, that's what's going on there. But that, again, it's still going to take years to replace all of it, assuming that the FCC is able to divvy up that money and the next administration doesn't figure out a way to claw it back and leave the Chinese gear in place, which, is their option if they don't care about security. In the education department, CISA is telling federal agencies to secure their Microsoft clouds. They released Binding Operational Directive, or BOD 2501. Remember, this is fiscal year 2025 for the feds. It provides guidance on implementing SCUBA, which is their security protocol. Not really protocol in the sense of a network protocol, but process or regime. And they have SCUBA documents for both Microsoft and Google environments. And it's pretty intense in terms of getting there, but they're basically telling federal agencies you don't have an option. So whether you are a federal agency or not, they're not saying why they're pushing this all of a sudden, but obviously there's something going on that they're not telling us. But you can find SCUBA resources online at CISA's website. And hardening is probably a good thing. And if you need help with hardening your environment, then please contact us. Next, the Salt Lake area school district is apologizing for exposing data on 450,000 people. Rather than putting out a press release, the superintendent went on a pre-recorded video and apologized, took a couple of pre-scripted questions, and the damage is done and you're kind of on your own. So they opted not to pay the ransom, and the ransomers decided to opt to release the data. In another breach event, North Korea is now identified as having stolen about $300 million in Bitcoins from DMM Bitcoin, which is a Japanese platform. But they got a great return on their investment in the few months since they stole that money. The value has gone from 300 million to 400 some odd million. So, their investment grew by a fair amount, like almost 50%. The loss did cause DMM to shut down, and customer withdrawals are restricted, meaning that if you had your money in one of these that particular one, crypto exchange, you may get it eventually, but you're not going to get it now. So they're going to have to figure out how they're going to go give people back their money when they gave it away to the bad guys. And so, as the next administration is fighting with China, and so they want to go on the offensive with China, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. North Korea is cleaning our clock. Next, also in breaches, the Rhode Island governor warns of a cyber attack on the state benefit system called RI Bridges. And that handles SNAP and Medicaid, cash assistance, health insurance, a bunch of other stuff. And, it sounds like based on those systems, other than health insurance, the impact will be felt mostly by poor people who really don't have the time, bandwidth, education, resources to go off and mitigate the risk that this represents. They had outsourced the operation of this system. The outsourcer, Deloitte, said, well, our systems weren't breached, it was your system. So big deal. Not necessarily great. Someone's a bit tone deaf. And then the state said that, we, the state, are worried about hackers stealing our money. They're not so much worried about hackers stealing consumers' money. They're worried about hackers stealing the state's money. So another bit of tone deafness. Someone needs to educate these folks on understanding how the media is going to perceive what they're doing. If you ever wonder why the hackers are winning, this is the reason. So the feds are now ordering Marriott hotels to implement a data security program. Why? Because literally 10 years ago, a subsidiary of Marriott called Starwood was hacked. That was in 2014. Marriott bought Starwood in 2016. They didn't detect the breach until 2018. That's still 6 years ago, right? And now in 2024, almost 2025, in a couple of days, the feds are finally saying, gee, you need to get your data security program in order. That's only 10 years after the event happened. So that's why the bad guys are winning. I mentioned the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. Like has been the case in previous years, it does have some cybersecurity goodies. So, check out what the Christmas elf or Hanukkah elf or Kwanzaa elf is providing to the cybersecurity community, but that's all good. Next, a Russian tanker, which is not really Russian, but is what's called part of Russia's shadow fleet. It's a series of old and really obscurely flagged tankers that are basically running the embargo and grabbing Russian oil and selling it. They have been I guess that's the word. They're being held by Finland. It is widely believed at this point that this tanker dragged its anchor for like literally 100 miles, and in doing so severed both a power cable running from Finland to Estonia, as well as multiple fiber optic cables running data between the two countries. And so the folks in the Baltic have been on high alert since the war started in Ukraine, and they caught these guys basically in the act of doing this. And they said, dear Captain, I think it is time for you to join us in a Finnish port of our choice. And while that was an invitation, the alternative is, we might take the military and board you, or we might just sink the ship and call it good. So anyway, when they boarded it, they discovered that the ship's anchor was missing, which is what happens when you drag an anchor. You sever the cables and then you let it go. So interesting. We shall see. The owner of the ship, which is United Arab Emirates, would like the ship back. I don't know that they're getting it back anytime soon. I'm speculating not, but you never can tell. But this is just part of Russia's efforts to increase tension in the area and just see how far they can go without someone blowing up Moscow. And lastly, in the security news bites, the feds are suing JP Morgan, Wells, and Bank of America over Zelle fraud. The banks really resisted doing anything for years and years until they realized that they were going to be in trouble with the feds. It's not clear what the opinion of the next administration is going to be over this, so this lawsuit may go away. There is a billionaire who is interested in buying TikTok. I don't know that the Chinese are interested in selling it, so we shall see. Right now, the law has been upheld by an appellate court, and oral arguments are due in about a week and a half at the Supreme Court as to whether or not to issue a preliminary injunction, not declare whether whether the law is valid or not, but just a preliminary injunction that would stop the law from being enforced on the day before Inauguration Day. But assuming that the Supremes decide that the law is law and it's fine, and it's really a crapshoot as to what they might do, then effective January 1st, you'll stop seeing the law in U.S. App stores. Next, a ninth telecom carrier has been added to the carrier breach list as a result of Salt Typhoon, the Chinese espionage effort. They're not saying who the ninth carrier is. We do know two of the carriers, AT&T and Verizon, are in there. Next, General Dynamics employees were phished successfully. The result of the phish is a compromise to their benefits portal, which, in the grand scheme of things, because these things were limited to individual employees, was a relatively small number of people whose accounts were compromised, not the overall system. And GD is working on it, but it does point to the fact that the human being is, in fact, the weakest link. And Texas is going after data brokers for not registering. There's a lot of details there in the newsletter that you can read about what's going on. But fundamentally, Texas is, being Texas, and they're saying, don't mess with Texas. And finally, if you're running in the Microsoft cloud and you don't know for sure whether your implementation is secure, give us a holler. We'll work with you. It's not necessarily a silver bullet, but we can sort of tell you where you stand pretty quickly. That does not require a lot of effort. Some effort, but not a lot of effort. But if the feds issued that binding operational directive that I talked about earlier, it tells me something is going on, and the something is not fatigue. So if you have not assessed the Security Cloud, or you'd like a third party to assess the Security Cloud, please let us know. We can be engaged for that. Otherwise, until next time, stay safe.